Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Justin Pariseau. I am Associate Professor of History and Coordinator of African and African American Studies at Prairie State College. I am very excited to be offering History 240 H1MP African American History this fall. It's an honors program course, and as a virtual course, we'll also be meeting once a week. So that's what the MP indicates, the meeting plan. We're going to be meeting once a week to be able to discuss primary source material and other written sources that are assigned in class, as well as to do some deep dives on specific subjects that we're going to be exploring together over the course of the fall semester. Just to give you a sense of what some of that might look like, one of the topics I'm especially interested in looking at in African American history is the idea of hidden history. Histories that most Americans are probably not that aware of, but that are central to the American experience. And when we consider what some of that entails, if we look at some primary source material, it can help to illuminate the narrative of American history in ways that secondary source material may not be able to do. And just as one example of that, as we look at this primary source that was generated right around the events of Lexington and Concord, April 19th, 1775. This is a list of the names of men who were killed and wounded in the engagement with British troops on the first day of the American Revolution. So as we kind of scroll through this list, you're not going to see anything that particularly stands out other than just a list of names, except that when you do a deeper dive and start to look at some of the details in a record like this. Notably that there are titles listed next to the names of most of the men. They're either given a military rank or they're named as Mr. And you can see that all the way through this list, except when you come across this particular man. It might be a little bit hard to make out here. It'll be easier in the class when I assign the document and blow this up a little bit for you to be able to see. But the name Prince Esterbrook's stands out. He's the only person on this whole list that doesn't have a Mr. or Captain or some other title next to him. He is also specifically identified on this list as a man of African descent, and you can see that just below his name here. So that stands out. Not something that we typically hear a lot about when it comes to the American Revolution. Black soldiers who were fighting in the fight for freedom against the tyrannical government of Great Britain during the Revolution. That's not a story that you usually hear about in 2020. And in fact, if we look at some of the recent attempts to commemorate those hidden stories that people just generally don't read about in their textbooks, if you visit Lexington Battle Green today in Massachusetts, this marker is there as of 2008, a marker placed to the memory of Prince Esterbrook, the first man to fight and to be of African descent, to be wounded in the American Revolution. So just a fascinating story that you typically don't hear a lot about based on the simple fact that Black history for a long period of time has not been part of the dominant narrative of American history books. To give you another example closer to my heart in terms of my own research and some of the work that I've done as a historian, this is a portrait of Absalom Boston that dates to the 1830s. He was a whaling captain on Nantucket in the 1820s, goes on to become a person who opens businesses and mercantile interests on the island. He ends up becoming a landowner and a land speculator. And most importantly, in the 1840s, he fights to integrate the Nantucket public school system so that his daughter can attend the same school as all of the other children on the island. And that's a fight that is successfully won a year later in 1846. Just a fascinating story, again, that foreshadows by 100 years or so the civil rights fight that'll be taking place in the 1950s and 60s and really persisting up to the present day with the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that we're seeing that are happening around the issues of police brutality and violence in the United States today. And then the last story I just wanted to share with you, again, speaking to the issue of hidden history, is Claudette Colvin. She was a young woman in Montgomery, Alabama, who refused to give up her seat on a bus 9 months before Rosa Parks. She was a central figure in the civil rights movement as a consequence of that activism. She was arrested just like Rosa Parks was. She just doesn't have the name recognition because she doesn't become one of the central figures in the Montgomery bus boycott as Rosa Parks does when that boycott begins following Rosa Parks's arrest 9 months later. So this will hopefully just give you some sense of a few of the stories we'll be talking about over the course of the fall semester. I hope you consider joining History 240 African American History Honors so that we can engage in these conversations about the past, engage in discussion about why certain histories are privileged and others are not, and how we can do the difficult work together of trying to recover those narratives and celebrating those narratives so that we can bring those stories to more Americans in the 21st century. So thank you for your time. I hope you consider taking the course, and I hope to see you this fall.